Good.
But Heather, whenever you want to get that thing kicked off and leave, please do. Thank you.
Maybe it wasn't this one, it might be the other two.
Planning board.
They by new.
Mine 20
20,
secret regs.
yeah.
So.
And I- So, but I don't see it when I quickly looked on minutes.
I didn't see it either. And because,
No,
yeah,
here,
well, that's stretch
That-
code for the building.
but that's different from that. So,
Sure.
you know what I mean, as
Yep.
far as update goes.
Yep.
But,
The stretch code and they should do new secrets.
Okay.
So we're gonna talk about that too. So Joe already had, I don't know if he had Joe's. notes.
Picking strawberries yet this
Joe
year?
already had a good- That's what I was.
no, it should
This
be.
is Joe.
No, they started.
Yeah, four here, not two.
My wife is out of town this week.
There's a lot of
She has
stuff.
A lot of it.
one of the missions that she told me to go on was to go and pick.
I don't know if you picked up.
Pick some berries.
Say quarts of strawberries.
Side of this parking lot to True Hill.
Nothing like them.
It's like about a 10-foot grade change. Yeah,
Up against like the cows.
yeah.
Thank you very much, Heather. Well, it's 6 o'clock on the nose. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this workshop meeting of the Town of Henrietta Planning Board on Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. Members present, Matt Borkowski, Patricia Brill, Craig Eckert, Walter Liss, Robert Barley, Marcy Reynolds, Dan Mistrella, Planning Board Attorney, and town staff present, Chris Martin, Director of Engineering and Planning. I will now invite the board to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God. Liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first item this evening will be the approval of the minutes from the May 16th, 2023 meeting. For the board, are there any questions or comments on the minutes?
No, sir.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Barley, thank you. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second that.
Mr. List, thank you.
Real abstain.
And Mrs. Brill abstains. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And Mrs. Brill has an abstention. Favor. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We have the minutes. Okay. Okay, first application this evening is application number 23007. The Society of Rochester, it's a building addition. This is for final site plan approval of a 5,040 square foot, one-story building addition to the existing building located at 360 Commerce Drive in an industrial zoned district with a mixed-use redevelopment area overlay district. Who's here representing the applicant, please? Sorry, Jeremy, thank you. Thank you very much. Before you start, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time and responding to all the comments in writing. That helps us out immensely, and we appreciate when you do that very, very much. So thank you.
Jeremy, can you just pull that mic a little closer to your mouth? It's really not that sensitive, so you got to get close to it.
Okay, so.
And the,
Is it on?
Is it even
I don't
on?
think it's on.
I don't think it's on.
just hold it.
That?
Yeah, there we go. Sorry.
All right. My hearing.
Good catch.
No, my apologies. We do intend to expand the existing vehicle parking, asphalt parking lot. Make some slight revisions to the existing truck parking. Expand the landscaping buffer along the southern property line. And because we're disturbing more than an acre, to install some stormwater management practices that are New York State DEC compliant. A little background on the property. The applicant purchased the property back in 2015. the previous owner who had been utilizing a portion of the site for truck parking area, basically leasing the land for truck drivers to park there. When the applicant purchased the property, they kind of took over that business and they were unaware of the use issues in regards to operating as a place of worship in an industrial district and also the truck parking as well. So we were required to obtain special use permits for both those items, which we did receive at the town board meeting on May 24th, basically to operate a place of worship in an industrial district and for the truck parking. In addition, we obtained area variances for a reduction in parking from 200 required to 150. And we also obtained side setback variance for a place of worship as well. Agency comments, most of these were pretty standard, but the one that is a bit of a potential concern in the future is the New York State DEC. The existing development and the proposed development has hardscape within the 100 foot buffer. So we have employed BME Associates to provide a wetland delineation report, and they've been in correspondence with DEC. Essentially, we're waiting for feedback from DEC, but if they come back and they basically say you can't have any hardscape in the 100 foot buffer, then we will reduce the current truck parking and we will move our proposed asphalt parking to comply with their standards. The property is within the 100-year floodplain, but the existing finished floor elevation and the proposed building additions finished floor elevation will be 2 feet above the base flood elevation. As far as town staff comments go, most of them are pretty standard and technical in nature. The only thing that we'll have to have some coordination with the architect with is sprinkling the building, and that'll require us to revise the existing water service. SWIP comments were pretty technical in nature, pretty standard, and the landscaping consultant comments were pretty standard as well. We're going to have to get a licensed landscape architect to certify the drawings, and also we were going to have to expand the variety of the plantings for the project. So that is essentially the summary for the project. Any comments, concerns?
Okay, thank you. So, quick question, you are still permitted to have the trucks back there and pay for the parking back there or the storage back there?
We did obtain town board approval. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right. We'll open it up to the board and the chair will recognize Mr. Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you can go into a little bit more, Jeremy, but what I'm looking for, I think specifically, I'm not looking for the full burden of the previous sins to come toward this project, but there was a whole lot of work going on back there that wasn't permitted prior, right?
Yes,
The
there
truck
was.
Parking was never permitted.
Correct.
None of those millings that stuff was added on over years.
Correct.
So I'm understanding that there is a decrease in what's going to be impervious to the millings and stuff.
There is yes, correct. There's a total net decrease in overall impervious area, and specifically in regards to the gravel trucking parking area.
Okay.
We're reducing that. We're increasing green space as a whole across the project.
And so is it the truck parking that's possibly in the buffer?
The truck parking and actually the eastern end of our vehicle parking lot is
Also
actually,
in that space as well.
it is. So like I say, if the DEC does come back and say, you absolutely can't do that, we will reduce the total truck parking area and we'll shift that eastern edge of the vehicular parking, and we'll basically move that up so we can still be within that 100 foot, outside of that 100 foot buffer.
Okay. And then for SWIP and such, there's what are the GIs and SWIP procedures that are going in? What are the practices?
So it's going to be a step tiered bioretention facility. There was some comment on how there's going to be 6 inches of ponding. I know it's a little bit technical, but we will have to probably provide some more spot shot elevations to provide clarity on how that system is going to work. But essentially, the vast majority of the runoff from the as the new asphalt parking lot will drain to that bioretention facility and then ultimately make its way to the existing stormwater pocket pond that we're expanding slightly.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't see the pocket pond.
Existing pocket pond is right here. We propose from there is to drain into that pocket pond and we will culvert underneath. Right away into the stream.
Oh, okay.
After the water.
It's not, I didn't see it listed on the existing site plan, so I guess that's where my confusion kind of also comes in.
Understood. We can
Maybe
add
it's
a,
that rectangle. That space is looking somewhat similar.
yeah, so yes, I will add a note to that.
So there is something there.
Yep.
Okay, and then the milling surface, that the truck parking, how is that being taken care of?
The truck parking. So we're basically going to remove the entire section and then put back, whatever fill material and then a minimum of 4 to 6 inches of topsoil and put back lawn area.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I meant the impervious area for the truck parking. How is that being treated?
That is also being treated by the bioretention
So
facility.
both parking areas
Yeah,
will be,
the vast majority is going to drain to the south to the bioretention facility. Some of it on the northern, eastern, and western periphery will, kind of sheet flow to the surrounding grass area
okay, but that's also potentially in the wetland buffer
potentially. And again,
being marked out.
that will be a potential concern. I think there was an on-site meeting between BME Associates and the DEC as early as or as soon as last week. I'm not positive on that, but like I say, once BME provides us with DEC comment, we will address and we will completely comply. And like I say, that truck parking will be the first to go.
Is the truck parking being subdivided off now?
So, yeah, so I don't know the exact specifics if there's specific assigned parking areas, but we will have the applicant delineate, specific widths for the truck parking stalls themselves. So whether it be by chain, that was my first impression by chains, basically 10-foot width, 10-foot stalls. That'll provide some wiggle room as far as, backing up, providing a K-turn means for K-turn in and out.
I think you mean subdividing the property?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure where you're going. I was going to let you go.
Sorry, I got ahead of myself. No, that is not currently in the applicant's interest at this time, unless it would be required by the town, though. I'm wondering, would the town board granting that special use permit, would that essentially preclude them from having to do that, Chris?
I think what Mr. Record is getting at is there's tax consequences. I think if it's just a church,
Right.
place of worship, they're tax exempt.
Correct.
However, when you have part of the parcel that's also a business, then they may lose some of their tax exempt status.
Yeah, so we've already told them that you're essentially making a profit at this quote unquote business, and they were, receptive, whatever we have to do to maintain, if we have to subdivide, that will be what they will have to do.
Okay. And then maybe a question for Dan as well as Chris is, usually a special use permit, which is way outside our authority, but when we are approving a planning board project of this, a parking lot usually needs a building. A truck parking area needs a building to operate off of, unless it's by special permit, right?
That's why they got stuck. One of the reasons why they got stuck, well, the reason why they got such a use permit for the parking lot, because there was no building that was associated with that use.
Right. So we're not allowing, in the planning board step, we're not allowing anything that says the church can have this truck parking because it's a town board special use
It's all
permit.
done by the town board through such a use permit process.
So I don't need to worry about setting an example from,
You can always worry, but.
yeah. I let you worry. I'm making a note so that you worry.
I do. I worry about you all the time.
You're good. Okay, so I guess that clears up that, and that's outside of our purview. I just wanted to make note on that as well. So good. So I love the building. I love the architecture to it. It's great to have it there. There certainly is an old issue, and I'm glad that it's getting fixed. I'm just trying to make sure that all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed so that we can go forward and this can go out without a hitch. So it's all the comments that I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eckert. The chair will recognize Mrs. Brill.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the building is beautiful. I'm excited to see it completed. It looks wonderful. I think one of the questions I had based on the conversation is moot at this point because it had to do with the parking and the separating out of the truck bays. So that is over and done with and nothing to do with the parcel we're talking about today, correct?
From my understanding, it's the same parcel right now. It's just been handled on the town board.
It's all one big parcel, that's correct.
Okay, my question was then, just in case, as far as separating out, you mentioned chains or ropes or something like that. How will that be managed?
It would be managed by the applicant. They would manage that. Either that or it would be the truck drivers themselves, as far as chains go, basically that's the line of where, your truck parking is. And if we have to get into details as far as this is your assigned truck parking, we can work that out with the applicant as well. It's a gravel parking lot, so paint really is not really going to work. So my first inclination was some sort of heavy chain to basically, it can get driven over, it can be readjusted, but ultimately, it can be adjusted,
So it would be, because my next question was going to be, how is that going to be held up? But it's going to be laid on the gravel.
Correct. Yep.
Uh-huh.
And whether the ends are secured down by something that'll allow you to kind of move it to the applicant's liking or the truck driver's skill level, I think 10 feet wide is pretty good for an experienced truck driver though.
Concerned about the chain though, if it's just set down like that, even if it's mounted, it's raised and it would be a hindrance to any plowing come winter.
Yes, that is something to consider. The plowing operation, I have to be honest, I do not know. I can look into that. What they do as far as plowing operations. Obviously the truck drivers are still working. So I don't know if the applicant has their own plow service. I would presume they do.
I think painting the gravel would be the best option for multiple reasons. I've seen gravel painted.
Okay.
Does it last years? No. Is it going to be, dug up when it's plowed? Possibly, most likely. But it's something that would have to be maintained probably at least once a year, maybe. But I think that would be a better option than laying a chain on the ground.
Sure.
I just see so many issues with that. And then maintenance. So let's just say there's 10 trucks
Yep.
that go there. They're only the trucks that currently are leased with them will be able to go there. No one else is invited to park overnight or anything.
Yep, that's
Okay, so
correct.
they're gonna know who belongs there. They're gonna be able to differentiate the appropriate spaces. Yeah.
Correct.
Craig, do you have any insight on painting on gravel or anything like that? Or is
I've
it?
tried it here. Oh, she said Craig, right?
She did.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Craig, go ahead, you can answer.
We've done it here before in parking lots for town uses. I've felt with truck drivers, they usually are pretty good with it by themselves and, professional drivers can probably get pretty close without the markings, but yeah, I don't know if they're plowing it now. It's just milling. So I'm assuming they are, maybe they're not. So.
Yeah, it's certainly something I think that we could work out,
Okay.
so why don't you go back to your client and, whatever you come up with, make just let a note to the plans or show how it's gonna be on the drawings.
Sure. Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Brill. The chair will recognize Mr. Borkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
I second what the chairman said earlier. Thank you very much for the comprehensive answers because it saves all of us a lot of time. All the things that I had highlighted, you've got answers to here. So I'm good there. My only question is a clerical one and probably for Dan. Because we're waiting on this DEC thing, do we have to make any kind of motion contingent on that?
I mean, you can, but I don't think that they can proceed with the project if they don't get the DEC permission. So I don't think it's necessary.
Because they would supersede.
Or it could be scaled back, in that case, it's less than what's presented here today.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions. I think it's Yeah, I'm looking at the drawings and they're really nice. So I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borkowski. Okay, we'll recognize Mr. Barley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Mr. Kimball, on an environmental assessment form on question 20, it talks about, it mentions remediation near the property. You know, was that within the last 5 years? And
Sorry, my recollection is that is of an adjacent property south on Commerce Drive, and I believe that was from the 70s.
okay,
I cannot recall what the level of contamination was, but the EAF, it will provide information on adjacent properties as well as the existing ones. So I do know that Joe Ardietta from our office, he did look into it and he found that I think it was some sort of spill in the 70s from a company back then. And I don't know the result of that. But I can look into that too.
I see
for
there's
you.
a code here. I'll look at it, but thanks for answering the question. I appreciate it.
Of course.
No other questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Barley. Chair will recognize Mr. Liss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
I have, the only question I had was looking at that site plan, there's a playground. It's
Correct.
there. I don't know if is there a separation? What's the separation between the playground and the truck parking? It's,
We're actually increasing the separation between the two. We're actually
Okay.
reducing some of that gravel parking area. I think it was probably around 10 feet, but now it's probably pushing it probably closer to about 20 to 30 feet away from that parking or that playground area.
you plan to they plan to landscape around that or put any kind of a walkway from the playground to their building?
We did not, but we certainly can. We certainly
Seems like
can
it
do
would be
that.
Safer to do something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, not sure. And this is just a single story building. Is there a lower level?
Nope, just a single story.
Single story.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liss. Chair will recognize Mrs. Reynolds.
Thank you. I don't have any
welcome.
questions at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yep, I didn't have any other questions myself, so thank you very much. Mr. Martin, can we move into seeker?
You certainly can. unless-
Okay. Any other Final comments or questions from the board or Mr. Mastrella?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeker review indicates the action under consideration is an unlisted action as per section 617.7 C1 VIII. The Henrietta Planning Board as lead agency has determined that the proposed action described below will not have a significant effect on the environment and that a draft environmental impact statement will not be required. The action under consideration is a site plan application by the Sikh Society of Rochester. It is an unlisted action and will not require a conditioned negative declaration. The purpose of this application for final site plan approval of a 5,040 square foot, one-story building addition to the existing building located at 360 Commerce Drive in an industrial zone district with a mixed-use redevelopment area overlay district. All relevant areas of environmental concern were identified. Evaluation and examination were carefully made in relation of the existing conditions versus the proposed site improvements. It has been determined that there will be no adverse environmental effect as a result of the proposed action. I, James Gruner, therefore make the motion that we make a negative declaration and that the chairman be authorized to sign the statement of environmental significance. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Eckert, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We have seeker. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve application number 23-007.
Thank you, Mr. Liss. Can I have a sufficient second, please?
Second.
Mr. Borkowski, thank you. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Motion's carried. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next application this evening is application number 23-009, True by Hilton. This is for final site plan approval of a 4-story, 81-room hotel located at 355 Kenneth Drive in a industrial with specifics zoned district. Now, this application was previously approved by this planning board back in 2017. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Mike Montalto with Costage Engineering. With me this evening is Tom Zwadowski with Rudder Management. I believe also online is Jay Patel and our architect Stephanie Hunt with Silvestri Architects to answer any building architectural questions you may have. And the Rudder folks are here for any hotel operations related questions.
I just want to make sure everyone's signed in just so I get the spellings correct. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So we were before the planning board 6 years ago in 2017, June and July, and obtained final site plan approval for this project. There has been no change to the plans. In fact, the plans that were submitted for this application were, the plans from 2017 due to funding and then COVID and then material shortages. The project was put on pause. The hotel and tourism industry is back to where it was at, and hotel projects are moving forward. They have their financing in place for this project and are ready to move forward. We were before the town board on Thursday evening and received approval for the special use permits for the project, which we had obtained before. One was for the hotel use in the zoning district. The other was for the overall hotel height. Those use permits had expired as well. It's a approximately 2 acre, site, zoned industrial. We are in receipt of a number of comment letters. They are primarily similar to the comments that were generated in 2017. We had received the comments and had not revised the plans, based on, at that point, the project had gone dormant. There have been a couple of code changes and a few staff changes, more specifically as they relate to the fire access routes for the project. We have 24-foot drive aisles on the project. Fire marshal has indicated those need to be increased to 26 feet. We have the room for that. We'll be moving the driveway, closer to the building to accomplish that. We've received Joe Ardietta's comments relative to stormwater, again, consistent primarily with the review in 2016, 2017. We've got underground detention. We've got the stormwater quality being treated by bioretention and rain garden areas. A portion of the, that system is not changing. There's some, again, very technical in nature. The rainwater charts have changed. We have to update, the narrative relative to that. We have to provide the ultimate stormwater maintenance agreements, that portion of things, the MS4 acknowledgement sign-off forms, those items. County comments were all primarily technical and routine in nature, that we need backflow prevention approval from, health department. Monroe County Water Authority has to sign off on plans. We have no issues with those. State DOT had made a comment that, a traffic impact study would be necessary and, to reach out to Zach Sarkey to discuss any scope. We talked with Zach. The comment was generic in nature. They see hotel, they say do a traffic impact study. The hotel, an 81 room hotel only generates approximately 35 trip gens at PM peak, which is its busy time, well below the 100, trip gen threshold for a traffic study. That was extensively that intersection and the other two that the signals are tied together from them being synchronized were looked at with the recent Taco Bell project. All he asked us to do was, for the record, produce a letter indicating that the trip gens, are 35, for at PM peak. So a trip gen letter will be provided to them. so that they can put that in their file. Stantec has created, has generated their landscaping comments. That's probably been the most substantive of changes relative to anything is the town code and guidelines have changed. Our landscaping department has already taken a look at it relative to the diversity requirements. We're over in terms of the number of trees that are being provided. So some of the comments relative to move a tree here or there to avoid utilities, we have no issue with. There was a comment at the town board relative to the new administration paying more careful attention to green space and what's on the site and, deferring to the planning board relative to what green space is available on the site. The plan that we've turned in has 29.5% green space. That will go down slightly as we make the improvements to widen the drive aisles. But like I said, we are over on the count for, the trees and whatever that are being provided. It is a relatively tight site. The hotel has typical, average occupancies of 70%. In the winter, those occupancy rates go down to roughly 40%. So snow storage for this site will be accomplished primarily on, pavement because the need for the parking spaces goes down. That winter 40% does coincide with our, regional winters and snowfall or whatever. So we're comfortable from that standpoint. In any of the staff comments that we've reviewed, nothing jumped out to us as being, as it didn't, several years ago. Like I said, there has been no change. It's the same building, it's the same finishes, it's the same program. For economic reasons, it didn't move forward. The only thing that really changed from that standpoint was they were under contract to purchase the property when we first went to the town board and planning board. They own the property. Their schedule is, they want to be, if I could tell them that they could pull a permit tomorrow, they'd like to be out there building. I've had to explain that we've got a number of agencies and town staffs. We received, the red lines, the technical comments, and, we'll be in the coming weeks, should the board look favorably on renewing the site plan approval, revising the drawings, providing responses, and, trying to get this across the finish line so that we can have a, summer construction start for the project. We acknowledge, the letter of credit requirements and all the, all the standard, requirements associated with a project of this size.
Right.
At this point, I'll conclude my formal presentation and
Thank you,
turn it
Mike.
over for
Were you on
comments.
this project 7 years
Yes.
ago?
Yep.
Or 6 years ago? Yep.
Yep. I had a conflict that evening and Alex Amering from our office, who's still, involved in the stormwater, is still there or whatever. Yes. I presented it to the town board 6 years ago and still, still
All right.
tied to it now. Yep.
Very good. Well, thank you. Now the chair will recognize Mr. Eckert.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
So these are the same exact plans from 2017?
Yep.
Okay, so are we looking at something that's final or preliminary or conceptual?
No, this is final. We made it through final site plan approval last time, Craig. We've got,
A lot of things have changed. Seeker, DEC regulations have changed.
Yeah, and I think Joe addressed those in his comments.
yeah.
That you have to obviously address his concerns. I think like.
The phase 2 stormwater guidelines are still the same. There's the rainfall intensity numbers for Monroe County have changed minorly, but it's, that, like I said, it's technical in nature. His comment letter is primarily identical to what it was in 2017. We have staff comments that have to be addressed, but Seeker, we had, Seeker was reapproved by town board Thursday evening. And when we first discussed bringing the project back, since nothing has changed materially with the project, seeker doesn't expire. So, there really, you've had some ordinance changes and you've had some staff changes, as the prime discussions are, your landscape guidelines have changed. We acknowledge those and similar to other projects our firm has brought before the town recently, have worked with, Stantec and staff relative to obtaining the diversity in species numbers. And like I said, even the quantities in terms of trees were over what code requires from that standpoint, according to the Stantec letter. The fire marshal comments, I think, were the more substantive in that, he's looking at saying he'd like the two side areas to be 26 feet wide. That's easy for us to adjust, and he wants a hydrant, on the property, and us to show the fire department connection. So they're,
And you're moving the existing fire hydrant anyway, so you saw that.
yeah, so it's, in my mind, those are benign, they're highly obtainable, and they're similar to, the town staff comments from before,
Right.
that
Sure.
we just didn't address those. We obtained final site plan approval from the board. It was contingent upon satisfying all, agency and staff comments, and it stopped, we didn't have signed Mylars, and we're primarily at the exact same point, Craig.
Okay, but did the building change?
Nope.
But now we have stretch code.
Yeah, well, Silvestri, the architects are dealing with whatever from an energy code and that portion, but the elevations and, the footprint or whatever is the same. There are components within the building that are probably being updated relative to building code, but, we're proposing a building footprint this size, and, these are the elevations, colors, textures, all the rest of it. That component is not changing.
Okay, yeah, I understand the concept. I'm just thinking that we've got a lot of comments to address from even from previous, from 2017, comments that weren't addressed that we're now adding more comments to. I guess I would kind of consider that a little bit more preliminary than final, but that's just my own opinion, I guess. The laterals across Kenneth are existing storm and sanitary, Chris? What it looked like on the plan? Okay, so there's no disturbance to the road. Everything else can tie it in. There's no other disturbance planned for Kenneth Drive
No.
besides the curb cuts. Okay,
I understand your concern, we were, from a planning and how would the project change standpoint, we're in a similar position, Craig. The project didn't move forward, which is why, we didn't address, the
no, I understand it from back then in 2017.
staff comments, and we've
Yeah.
reviewed the staff comments, and even if you look at Joe's, he has two comments, that he bolded that showed what was different from 2017. His
Right.
comments were primarily, he's very thorough with stormwater, DEC regs haven't changed. So, he does have some technical things relative to the report and, whatever that need to be tweaked that are similar. Again, we've reviewed and we didn't respond in writing because, in our mind, that some of that's premature until we've gotten planning board feedback, all the rest of it.
It's not a requirement, and if I may interject for a minute, the level of detail that were in these set of plans are very similar to other final plans that we've seen before the plan. So.
For final.
For final, right, because as you know, we don't do concept report, we don't.
We used to.
For the site plan, so the utilities are there, the inverse elevations, things of that nature. So they do meet our requirements for a final set of plans.
Does this stormwater travel down to the overall pond? North?
I think everything flows south, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I've got to look at the plans. I believe it goes south as well.
Because this development had an overall pond, which is north in the corner. It's now at the roundabout, right?
And if I remember though, you're doing underground storage.
Yeah,
So
correct.
that is probably your storage requirement, but you're right, it probably does flow towards the south, towards Lehigh Station Road.
Yeah, it's all, it ponds actually in the parking lot or whatever. It's all storm tech chamber, subsurface infiltration, et cetera. We don't have, because there was not an existing stormwater outlet or connection point, we're not hard connected to to anything.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that existing lateral goes north towards the pond or south right towards Lehigh.
Yeah, I don't have the pencil in front of me.
And honestly, that point quotes to.
It goes
possibly
north,
benefit you.
it goes north, correct. There's an 18-inch HDPE that then is a manhole directly in front of us. The storm drainage on Kenneth Drive then goes to a 24-inch pipe and it's headed north on Kenneth Drive.
So then was it not added into the overall design with that pond? It's a mega pond for the entire parcel, isn't it?
Yeah, and that could be, this is evaluated by my time. But what I will say is that they are providing stormwater management out of the chamber system.
Right, I understand.
So if it doesn't, then it certainly meets with that part. So obviously we'll check it over on detail. If the stormwater management isn't up to our standards, then it'll have to be redone.
Okay. No,
We can check into it.
I'm actually looking at this as a benefit to them. I wonder if it needs the storm chambers. If it's going to the pond for the quality or for the quantity, you've got the quality for the GI. And
We had to dig up the drainage reports from back in the 80s and 90s, and this was probably the 90s when this was put in.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and our design approach, Craig, has been that, pre-existing condition is its lawn area and what's coming off of it. We in our design did not take credit for it going somewhere else and further treatment,
It's a standalone parcel.
we have treated this from a stormwater management and design standpoint as it's a standalone project.
I understand.
Yep.
Yep, that's what I see.
And I
Yep,
think we have for the other projects that we in that area as well, when the Taco Bell site came in and then the other hotel across the street. They were all standalone parcels. I'm trying to remember, I think this was actually designed in phases. And I want to say the pond was probably for phase 1 and 2, or this might have been a 3 or,
Okay. Lot 204 did GI, but just drained to the pond.
yeah,
That was up at the top, Methodist Hill.
right. And I think that's where the pond comes in. But it's something we can look into.
Okay, so that was my other concept, was just trying to find out where that went from there. The last note that I have is to just check for, looking for a comm check on the electric for the parking lot. Your electrical site designer probably did a comm check on it.
Yeah.
And just to make sure that that meets the new standards. Especially with these new bright LEDs. And then that's the last of my notes. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eckert. Chair will recognize Mrs. Brill.
Help me remember your last comment. I'm in the middle right now. okay?
Comm check.
Just help me remember it.
Roger that.
The only thing I would add, and I brought this up, I think with every addition to this property, but I think it's more important now than ever. Bringing in a nice hotel like this, going to bring a lot of people that are not familiar with the area. The cat tracks, Chris, we've
Yes.
talked about them before.
Yeah.
I had an incident just this week. I get on the thruway, a few times a week, get my gas, get my coffee at the Dunkin', I get in the right lane because I know that's the left turning lane. People don't know that. So becomes 3 lanes there. and they were in the left lane because their GPS probably told them to turn left, and they had to cut in front of me really quick to get on the throughway. So I think cat tracks and
Yeah, and I know we, obviously, the intersection is controlled by the New York State Department of Transportation, and we've had numerous conversations with them. But we haven't had any luck. Our deputy town supervisor could probably give a little more information on it. I mean, to pull that forward, because he does a lot of good projects. So in any event, yes, we will certainly bring it up to the DOT once again to see if but we have a lot of their attention, maybe.
give me their name, I'll give them a call.
Zach Stark.
That would be, I just think it's a no-brainer there. I've thought it from, every time I would leave work from that property at 5 o'clock, it's just, and it's so much more as paychecks are starting to come back on site
Right.
and introducing the hotel. So, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brill. Chair will recognize Mr. Borkowski.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just, for clarity's sake, basically nothing is changing on this other than things that are required to meet newer code standards, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borkowski. Chair will recognize Mr. Barley.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Is there gonna be any land bank parking for this project?
No, code requires 85 and that's what we're providing. So, yep.
All right, thanks. No other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barley. Chair will recognize Mr. List.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm
Oh.
all set. Thank you.
Very good. Chair will recognize Mrs. Reynolds.
Thank you. My only question has already been addressed about the traffic
Mhm.
on Kenneth and Lehigh Station. That's already been brought up. I have no other questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any final questions or comments from Mr. Mastrella?
Yeah, going back to the conversation that Mr. Eckert was having. I understand that that there are some updates, and I guess what I'm asking you is that going to be shown on the final plans that you submit for signatures?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've received red lines from Chris, and we've got to respond to, all comments and final plans turned in for signatures will represent all of that.
So for instance, if the drive aisles are now shown as 24 feet, before they're signed, they're going to be 26 feet.
Yep.
Okay, so when the board issues, assuming that the board makes a final approval, it should probably incorporating what the applicant has agreed to as far as modifications to the site plan that's before the board right now. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Mastrella. Mr. Martin?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one comment. I actually missed it in my written comments. As I was going through them, I noticed that I should have had it put in there and I didn't. I believe that this parcel is subject to extension 37 sanitary sewer impact fees. What that is, if the parcel is in the tributary area of the sanitary sewer, trunk sewer that needs repaired, then applications have to provide funds for these repairs. I'll have to double check, but if my memory serves me correctly, that this is one of those parcels that's on the fringe of that tributary area. So I would want that as one of the conditions that if it is, then this project would have to pay extension 37 sanitary sewer impact fees. And it's based on square footage and also on use. So if it's something that has like a higher water usage, it pays more per square foot than it would be if it was something that did not. And I can give you those figures.
Appreciate it. That's not part of the tax rate on the sewer use. That's an additional to all that.
So it's a one-time flat fee and that's it.
Okay.
And we would want that prior to pulling the building permit. But I do want to verify just to make sure that it is within our district.
Understood.
And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, except for seeker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. Case seeker review indicates the action under consideration is an unlisted action as per section 617.7 C1V III. The Henrietta Planning Board as lead agency has determined that the proposed action described below will not have a significant effect on the environment and that a draft environmental impact statement will not be required. The action under consideration is a site plan application by Rudra Management. It is an unlisted action and will not require a conditioned negative declaration. The purpose of this application for final site plan approval of a 4-story 81-room hotel located at 355 Kenneth Drive in an industrial zoned district. All relevant areas of environmental concern were identified. Evaluation and examination were carefully made in relation of the existing conditions versus the proposed site improvements. It has been determined that there will be no adverse environmental effect as a result of the proposed action. I, James Gruner, therefore make the motion that we make a negative declaration and that the chairman be authorized to sign the statement of environmental significance. Do I have a sufficient second, please?
I'll second that.
Mr. List,
Mm-hmm.
thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, we have a seeker approval.
And I will be happy to do a motion to approve. Based on preliminary, Mr. Martin will confirm if this is part of the district for extension 37 sanitary sewer impact fee. Do I have that worded correctly, Mr. Martin?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And I think it was contingent on the changes required by code updates have to be on the drawings.
Yes. Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Borkowski. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll look
Have a
forward
great
to seeing
evening.
your property.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Now the pressure's on.
Mr. Patel was there.
Yes.
Hello.
Well,
How
congratulations.
are you?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, our last item tonight is it's a discussion item for Henrietta Whitestone Apartments. We are to discuss the density and height requirements for the proposed 175 unit multifamily dwelling project in order to provide the town board with an advisory opinion. This project is located at 2811 East Henrietta Road in a commercial B1 zoned district with a mixed use redevelopment overlay corridor. The applicant is proposing 17.1 dwelling units per acre, whereas 14 dwelling units per acre is the maximum density allowed. The applicant is proposing a height of 49 feet 3 inches, or 49.3 feet, whereas 30 feet is allowed. The town board does ask that we provide written comments, as part of our discussion this evening. So good evening, Jesse.
Yeah, good evening, Mr.
Jesse.
Chairman, members of the board. First of all, I don't know whose idea it was to switch this meeting from 7 PM but to 6 PM, but I thank them immensely for doing that. I wish
your
more,
First time here in a long time, then. This is our second year doing that, right? I think,
Is it?
yes, sir. Yeah,
well,
yeah. So welcome
I'm gonna
back.
start coming more often then. If we could just maybe switch to the overall site plan there so I can give everybody some site context. But again, here on behalf of Whitestone Development Partners, with me here this evening is Mr. Tom George and Justin Mirando, who are both from Whitestone. You might be familiar with some of the projects that they were involved in that were under a different owner, different LLC, you know how that goes, but that includes the Apex project, the Lodge, and also Lehigh Station over on further in Southwest Henrietta. We're actually working also in conjunction with Spaletta Construction and FSI. And the reason why that's important is, you know, by having really everybody at the table, it allows us to take a holistic look at this whole mixed use development area. So it extends from our subject site, which is the former Growmore Farms, which I think everybody's familiar with. It's, you know, since, you know, been demolished and is essentially just a large concrete slab and asphalt. But also looking at, you know, in conjunction with the Dome parcel, and then up to, you know, Fairview Avenue with one parcel to the south of the library, which recently received approval for a La Quinta Hotel. This board was, I believe, privy to that review and approval. And then lastly, another commercial parcel that's right on Calkins Road that hasn't yet been identified for a particular development. And that's important because this is all in the mixed use overlay district. So we look at all these different mixed uses and how they can interact. And fortunately, we have all three of these developers, supporting the applications, supporting the idea of this redevelopment project. When we look specifically at our site, I don't know if whoever's controlling the computer there wants to switch to the more enlarged version, but we have an approximately 8-acre site that again was formerly Growmore Farms. We are proposing a single 4-story building that would have 175 units with associated parking and also some covered parking that would occur in those areas, just provide an additional amenity for the future residents. One of the things that's interesting about this project compared to some other multifamily homes or housing projects you may have seen is that it does have a parking level underneath the building that will provide approximately 105 parking spaces for those residents underneath the building. And one of the reasons why that's good is not only is it great for the residents because they're right there, and we do get a lot of seniors in addition to young professionals in these types of projects, but it also allows us to not have this sea of parking lot out on the surface. So that's some of the items with site plan. Hopefully we can talk a lot more about that in the coming months if we get through the special use permit process. But as mentioned, when we started the meeting, we are subject to a special use permit for the mixed use overlay application and also the multifamily component and associated building height and density. And the two things we wanted to talk about this evening were height and density. Specifically, as I know there's been several conversations, I don't know how many have occurred at the town board versus this board regarding, different projects in the town and what's an appropriate height and what's an appropriate density. And just want to talk a little bit about that, starting with the building height. So the first thing, or one of the first things that we did was we started to look around our surroundings, and the 2011 town's master plan, comprehensive master plan that the former chairman Minotti was very much involved in. And I had the pleasure of spending a lot of time working with him on that. Very much identified kind of this whole area as part of the town center. And we started to look at, well, what else is in the town center? And some of those buildings are, of course, when we developed the library back, that was probably 6 or 7 years ago. The library, we have the Dome, we have the Fairview Apartments. We have hopefully the La Quinta Inn, which was recently approved that we're going to be building. And of course, Wegmans. And when we look at the different building heights, again, we're proposing approximately 49 feet. The Dome is currently 55.5 feet. The library is 46 feet. Wegmans is 58 feet. The top of the roof at Fairview is approximately 50 feet. And we have the La Quinta, which was approximately 54 feet. So when we look at all the other different buildings in our immediately surrounding area, they all are in that high 40s to low 50 range, which I think somewhat speaks to at least considering going with a building height of 49 feet here, which would allow us to get 4 stories. The other thing that's good about going to the other thing we could do is say, okay, instead of going 4 stories, let's only go 3. And then let's make this building longer and, essentially have the same amount of units, but just a larger building and a larger footprint. But what that does by going to 4 stories, for starters, it's better for our residents because our internal corridors aren't as long. If anyone's ever been to one of those 2-story hotels where you get your room key and you turn the corner and it's like a 200-yard bowling alley to get to your room, we try to avoid that for our residents, and going with a higher, more efficient building is one way to do that. As I mentioned earlier, it also allows us to have more green space. If we were to lower the building height and spread the building out, now that building is taking over more area that we could otherwise designate as green space and also as open space. And just in general, the taller you go with a building, the less environmental impact there is for exactly that reason. The other thing I want to point out, and this is, I think, especially important as it relates to, 14 units per acre is the allowable density without having to ask for the special use permit in this district. Why does it make sense to go to 17 units per acre here? And this also applies to building height. Why would we consider 4 stories here? And I think that's where the context of the neighborhood comes in. For starters, our project with a 49-foot building height does not have any single-family homes immediately adjacent to it. It's got a giant parking lot associated with the dome that's behind it. It's got the vacant Iaculli land that's also behind it. It's got the also parts of the dome and commercial areas to the north. And then it's got East Henrietta Road that defines its eastern border. The buildings along Eastern Henrietta Road then are primarily small commercial type uses and don't have too many single family homes where people are actually living. Conversely, if you look at the library, for example, that's actually a similar height to what we're proposing. It's across the street from single family homes where people are actually living in. And the distance from the right of way to the library is approximately 70 feet, whereas we're proposing 112 feet. So we're well over 50% further away from the road, and we're not even across from single family residents. And that's not necessarily to be a knock on the library anyway. I'm just trying to put it in context of why 4 stories and 49.3 feet here isn't an odd request in our opinion. It's very much consistent with the other things that have happened in this particular area. The other item that comes up in addition to the building height is the density, and those two things are in many ways, tied together, of course. Well, one of the advantages of having all these different developers and landowners working together is we can do things like share parking, for example. So in the dome, you have this large parking lot that most times is underutilized. So we've put together an agreement where we could take this 2 acres of shared parking on the dome site and then help use that to offset our parking demand that's generated by our project, which requires 2.5 spaces per unit, just like any other project would. So now if you look at our site plan, and again, I don't know if anyone can pull that up, it was part of our application. I know I asked earlier, but I don't want to be.
No, I couldn't find it. Got LOI, updated letter of intent, updated supplemental, and I got elevations. That's all that I have electronically at the moment.
So anyway, the site plan was submitted, and thank you, Ms. Brill, for helping Justin out. But I think when you look at it there, you can see that when you look at our parcel around the building, there is a very generous amount of green space. Just to put that in perspective, the Growmore, the site in its current state, the demolished Growmore Farms, is about 20% green space versus we're proposing in the current layout 53% green space. So by going with the building height that we propose and by sharing the parking lot, we can provide far more green space than what we typically would on a project similar to this. And, I think that's certainly a very good thing for the project. The other thing I wanted to point out is the proposed unit mix here is very, very heavy towards the 1-bedrooms and 2-bedroom units. And one of the interesting things about density is, and I've had this discussion with municipalities across the state of New York, is, what does density mean as it relates to units? Because you could have a 1-bedroom unit, or you could have units with 4 or 5 bedrooms, such as, one of the projects that I know Aptitude's building over on East Henrietta Road. When we did Apex, it had a lot of 4s and 5s in there. And really, density is residence, in our opinion, because residence equals the amount of traffic, residence equals the number of beds. Whether you have a 2-bedroom unit with 2 people living in it, or 2 1-bedroom units that are next to each other, the potential for impact, I think, is pretty similar. But if you were to say that these are all 2-bedroom units, then you would have a slightly different result. And what I mean by that is based on our current unit mix, there are 291 beds. Now, if you said, and that's somewhat related to 17.1 units per acre, if you said, okay, forget the 17.1 units per acre, what can you do with 14 units per acre, which is what's allowed with your 10-acre site? So that would be 10 units per acre, or I'm sorry, 14 units per acre, 10 acres, 140 units. Now, if those 140 units were all 3-bedroom units, let alone 4 and 5, forget about that. But even if they were 3-bedroom unit average, that would be 420 beds, which is substantially higher than what we're proposing at 291. Even if it was 2 bedrooms if every single unit or the average was a 2-bedroom unit, at that allowable density, it would be 280 beds, which is almost identical to what we're proposing. So I know that's a lot of math and probably more complicated than it needs to be. But what I'm really trying to do there is demonstrate that even though our unit count might seem high, because we have so many 1-bedrooms, the amount of residents and the impact is, we think very much comparable and potentially even less than if we just approached it with a density that's allowed by code at the 14 units per acre. We could take the exact same building and we could just say, okay, take these 2 1-bedrooms and make it a 2 and charge double the rent that you would on a 1. And all of a sudden everything works by code and really the project hasn't changed. But we don't necessarily think that that's the best approach. There's certainly a market. The developers, Whitestone and people affiliated with Whitestone, were very much a part of the entire development over here at Fairfield Apartments. And there's a lot of 2s and 3s in those units. They're townhome units. They have their own individual garages, a lot of them, and they've been tremendously successful. They've been working on that project for, I believe, 8 years now, from back when we got started, and has hit a very good demand. And in my opinion, been worked out really well. I drove through there today and there's people walking their dogs. There's people playing pickleball. There's people at the pools. There's a lot of pedestrian activity, which is, I think, what you really want in a town center. What we're seeing, though, is the demand for more of the smaller units, the 1s and 2s, coming from, again, the empty nesters and the young professionals. And I'm sure you've all heard this before, but that's why we're going with the 1s per units. That's why we're seeking the density variance, or it's not even a variance, but the special use permit, because we're trying to hit that market that we believe people are really looking for, rather than just saying, well, let's just do all 2s, 3s, and 4s like everybody else and jam more people in there. But hey, at least we met the density allowance. That's just simply not the case here. And also, why is density? We talked a lot about the town center. I know there were some projects recently approved or proposed, further up on East Henrietta Road that might not, believe the town might have found that it wasn't appropriate. But why is density? Why is the building height that we're pursuing? And why is the 17.1 units per acre appropriate in this location, in addition to everything I've already said? And I think if you look where it is, where do you want to put people? Back when we did the Apex project, whether you're a fan of it or not, but we were essentially told by the supervisor that, hey, if we're going to put students anywhere, let's put them as close to campus as possible, because they have to go somewhere, and why not have them right at the front door so they can use the shuttle, so they can walk, so they can bike. And that's worked out tremendously well for that project, which was fully occupied pretty much overnight when it was completed. Well, in this case, looking at this particular project, where do you want to have residents who are living in the town of Henrietta? Well, if I was going to be a resident, I would want to be, I would love to be close to Wegmans, within walkable distance of Wegmans. Certainly close to all the facilities that the town has to offer. You have obviously the rec center, you have the library, you have the gorgeous park, all here that could be completely in walking distance that people wouldn't necessarily have to drive to. And you're in a location where you're not right up against single family homes. I know 2160 East Henrietta Road had an application where their immediate neighbors were single family homes. And they were actually up on top of the hill, and yet right in the backyards of single family homes. Passero was involved in a project that was approved at 4 stories for the Southridge project over at the northeast corner of East Henrietta Road in Dakota. And we did a lot of things to limit the potential impact there. But in this case, we don't have any single family neighbors. And I think it's about 400 feet all the way across the road. And on the other side of those commercial properties, where you're not even going to be able to see our project from there until you get to a neighbor. So in our opinion, it just makes a lot of sense to pursue this project with the density and the height that we're asking for all those reasons, because again, where would you want to put that density and satisfy that demand that, we know is out there? So that's essentially our review. I know this board and the town board have entertained a lot of requests for multifamily housing over the years. It's not uncommon to get the project, well, how many more projects are you going to do? And where's the demand? And one of the things to keep in mind is that by the time we go through the special use permit process and the site plan process and get signed Mylars and sign up a contractor and get all our permits and build this thing, you're talking about at least 3 years. So 3 years from now, a lot of projects that were recently approved and under construction or just finishing have long since been done and stabilized. Like I said, we've been at the Fairview project for almost 8 years now. So, we're confident that we're not going to be an issue where there's too many rental units in the market. In fact, we believe it's far from that. But we're not necessarily here to talk about use, more building height and density, but I think it's important to at least point that out. So that's all I have for you all this evening.
Well, thank you, Jess. I think you did a nice job tying everything together, very logically and cogently. It sounds like a decent project to me, but I'll open it up for the board for discussion now. So it's just our thoughts and comments. And Mrs. Reynolds, I will start with you.
Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate that. And I know we're talking about height and density, but I'm just curious about the traffic patterns. You have a proposed exit on East Henrietta Road. That's a 4-lane road right there.
Sure.
And turning left from out of one, I can see people turning right out of one and left out of another, and that potentially causing an issue being so close, the entrances. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. For starters, there was a very important point I wanted to make that I forgot to make, which was also the fact that because we're redeveloping an area that's already developed, we get to utilize existing infrastructure. We don't need new easements. We don't need sanitary sewer extensions. And one of the things that we have in place is a significant traffic network, albeit with a challenging road at East Henrietta Road. What we do have is 2 existing curb cuts that have been used in the past. And while I don't have the specific numbers and the completed traffic study done today, I am told I will have it done tomorrow, but Mr. Martin in the town engineering department did request that a full traffic study be completed before the town board would even consider making any kind of movement on seeker.
Thank
So
you.
once I have the results of those, I'll be happy to speak to them in more detail.
Yep. Appreciate that. That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Yep, that was a question I had too, right away. How you're going to turn left out of there. So be curious to see that report. Chair, recognize Mr. Liss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
Look forward to having, as this project evolves, I'd like to see how you're going to do the connectivity to all the amenities, the dome.
Sure,
the library, around the parking.
right. I spent an hour before I came here looking at the exact same thing, driving and say, okay, how do we connect this to that?
Yeah, I look forward.
But the
to seeing
opportunity is
that.
there.
Yeah. And as far as height and density, your engineering report covers it, and you covered it tonight very thoroughly, and I'm satisfied with your explanation. I have no issues with that whatsoever. What was the other thing I was gonna? Oh, in the it's unrelated to our discussion item tonight, but it related to traffic. In the traffic report, there wasn't anything checked as far as how will the proposed action result in substantial increase in traffic above present levels? And it's checked no. And I just kind of raise a question to that.
That's this happens all the time. So the way that this New York State in its seeker handbook defines substantial is generating 100 vehicular trips or more at a certain access point, which we don't quite hit that threshold.
Right.
Regardless of that, we can check it no, we can check it yes. We're still doing a full-blown traffic study, and we're still going to handle it the same way we would, regardless of what that box is checked.
All right.
So
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Mr. Liss. Mrs. Reynolds, I want to go back to you real quick. Did you have any comments or concerns on either the density or the height?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Joe,
you.
recognize Mr. Barley.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Jess.
hey,
Can this project be done within the density?
can the project be done at 14, not in its current form? So if the board were to come back and say, look, we don't buy everything you just said, and we want you to stay to 14 acres, there's a few things that happen, right? Well, maybe we keep the project exactly the same as it currently is, and we do that little swapping of units. But we don't necessarily want to do that because that's not the demand that's out there. We don't think the project will be as successful. There's also an economy of scale as it relates to the underground parking. And we think that's no one wants to hear money, but the underground parking costs a substantial amount of money.
Right.
And by getting the density that we're requesting, we can just about make the numbers work where we're able to build that parking, provide that amenity, and have a lot more green space. So at a project at 140 units with this unit mix, might look a lot different, where all of a sudden we're not doing the underground parking. We have larger parking lots. We'd actually have less open space. And we don't really think it's worth doing all that just to check the 14 units per acre box.
How many single units were you thinking of doing?
79.
79, okay. I have one more question. For this project, will Comida be used?
No, sir.
No? The Apex project, how long you owned it? How long was it owned? Did you sell it? Did it get sold?
It was sold. I don't know if Tom, you want to speak to that anymore, but it was.
Is there?
Rob,
All
I'm
right.
sorry, what was your question? I didn't.
My question was about the Apex project. RIT. And right, right.
That was developed a lot of the coordination university
Mhm.
and university.
Okay. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
So at this
Thanks.
point, Mr. Barley, you favor the density and height, or you?
I just wanted to get an opinion on
Yeah.
if it could be done
Okay.
within that. I don't know if the town board has the wherewithal where they're gonna change the ordinances for density in this corridor. I don't know,
Mhm.
but just a question I had.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Borkowski,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you're welcome.
Jess is always a good sales pitch. You're always really good at it. I'm conflicted on this because I know you do good work. I know what's currently there now. I know something like this is going to go there. This looks pretty good on the surface. But to answer the questions at the heart of this, I don't like either the density or the height. However, and the density, my issue is that is inextricably intertwined to 300 people trying to take a left turn going north on East Henrietta Road. So that scares the heck out of me. So density is a very crazy thought when you're thinking about, like I said, I'm estimating 300 cars. And they're not all going to turn north. So I get that. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Your analogy to the library or the rec center, I forget what it was, but it wasn't lost on me because that was a good comparison because you do have residential on the other side of Calkins, whereas here you're right, they're mostly businesses. However, I don't, and I could go check this out and I could extrapolate, there's some pretty good software. But what I would like is some kind of virtual elevation as though you were standing on that side of East Henrietta Road. And I want to know what 63% higher than what code is looks like. I would actually like to see a rendering of that. And you guys should be able to do that blindfolded, I would think.
We can. Not
Makes sense.
blindfolded, but
What's that?
pretty easily, just not
Yeah,
blindfolded.
right.
Sometimes I think some of my people are blindfolded, but that's a different issue.
Yeah, because seeing it, it could be completely put out and I would just be like, oh, that's fine. And you're right. Most of those are, I just looked at the satellite imagery. I don't think there's any residential that would be facing it directly. I'm kind of looking at maybe the neighbors that the back of their house is looking there. I don't even know if they can see past the ones that are on Eastern Area Road, but those other neighborhoods. That scares me a little bit. So I would like to have some kind of rendered fake what that elevation would look like. The density, it really just comes down to a traffic thing. I know we're not talking about traffic, but like I said, they're inextricably intertwined. So that scares me too. I don't, on the surface, like I said, something's going to go here, but can it be shorter and can it be less people? I would like both of those things, but.
Yeah, the thing I didn't, and I won't go into it tonight, and I've done it before, but the thing I won't do is that, if you took, when we develop commercial retail type spaces, office, medical office, it's usually at about 10,000 square feet per acre. Pick a town, Brighton, Greece, you always end up there. So if we took this 8 acres and did 80,000 square foot of medical office space and then ran the trip generation on that, or of retail and ran the trip generation on that, I think what you would find is that this type of use generates far less traffic, especially during the peak hour, than those types of uses. And again, we can kind of table the traffic discussion a little bit, but when you consider what the underlying zoning currently is, and that it is in the commercial district and how large the parcel is, and the types of things that are allowed here, you could put a Starbucks, a Burger King, and some of that stuff
And I'm also, I realize that with all the little feeder roads you have around this thing, people are gonna gravitate towards the path of least resistance anyway. So if I had to head north, I probably wouldn't try to take a left there. I would probably try to go out Wegmans and hit a light or something. I don't know. But if
Right.
traffic became an issue, I could see people doing that. Not that we necessarily want them going through all the parking lots either, but I can certainly see this working. Don't get me wrong, but on the surface, I don't like either the elevations or the density.
All right, thank you, Ms. Borkowski. You mentioned Starbucks and Burger King. What about a car wash? Would that fit on that site then?
We can fit 3 of them,
Huh?
all different brands if
Okay.
you guys are up for it.
They're putting some in the underground park.
And we're gonna do some self-storage in the back if that's okay.
There we go. Mrs. Brill?
Do you really think the underground parking will be a go?
Yes.
I mean, it's just such a cost. I'm like.
It is, and there's been the reason why I say yes is because we've talked about that extensively with the design team for months. And there are other projects in Monroe County where we've had to value engineer out the underground parking. But in this case, with the proposal as it currently stands, we are confident that we can make that work. It's close though. It is expensive.
So you did a great job of analogizing the height of the buildings next door. I wrote down every single one of them for the notes that I'm taking for the town board. When I first saw it, I'm like, why would we go higher than what is required? And then I look at everything else and where this is located, and it does not face residential. It's a beautiful design. It really is a really nice design. I question pickleball versus not pickleball and tennis. Just putting it out there.
But with all the green space we have, we can do all of it.
And one of the things I thought when I saw the parking up against the courts, will people from outside be able to come in and use the facilities? That's something I immediately thought of when I saw that.
And there's a lot of those discussions that would happen as part of the site plan process once we get there.
Absolutely. And then the biggest thing I had when I first looked at this is because when I do shop at Wegmans, I use that little.
The back road there, yeah.
I use that and I turn left off of East Henrietta because I live south of there. And I'm lucky enough to be able to turn right to go home. But there are some times when I turn left and it's, you roll the dice depending on what time of the day it is, if you can or can't. And then I'm envisioning all the cut throughs. Wegmans going to appreciate the parking. They're going to be getting a lot more business from the residents of the parking. There's that. There's one exit that has a light, one exit that does not. And then if they cut all the way through and it's connected over to Fairview, there's a light there.
Not yet, but it's going there.
It's not there yet.
At
No, it's
Fair
not there
Avenue,
yet.
it's
You're
not there
right.
yet.
Sorry. It's coming. So that's good. And I'm just doing the math with everybody that lives over at Fairview now, everything that's gonna be going in and then this. But I'm curious to see how the traffic flow will be. And I have all the confidence in the world in you and how that will be made to work and flow. There's absolutely, I'm not even gonna make the next statement. So I have no problem with it. Just curious to, no problem with the height based on where this is. In relation to the other buildings and the density, I'm very curious to see how it will be addressed with the layout and the traffic flow.
All set?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eckert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, just good job. I was worried about it and you've helped communicate some of my worries, so it's been clear. I agree with the underground parking, the first floor parking. I think that helps. If you're gonna go up, then might as well. I don't know if that's something, again, that we can make a criteria so that it doesn't go away, because that then changes your grease and space and you're altering that. So
That's fair.
if that's a trade-off, I get it. So am more accustomed to the height with the parking because you are saving the green space and the density communication, I agree with.
We actually work in several communities, just as a kind of random thought here, not random at all, but that give you height bonuses when you do cover parking under the building for that exact same reason.
Well, it's a trade-off.
Yeah,
So I guess if we're
exactly.
going to take a look at the trade-off, then that's the benefit to the neighbors. I will not give you points for picking on my library design.
I didn't pick on it. It looks great.
It was a pass road design. I will place that. And I'll note too that some of the other stuff, like especially like the Dome Arena, does sit probably about 10 feet lower in grade than what you probably have up here for a finished grade.
That's true.
So it's not as formidable. And but I'll make a note too, that if this was behind the fairgrounds on the Ag Color property, like the town center project was, or what's Fairview now, right? It's Town Center Fairview or Farview?
Fairview.
Fairview. Nobody sees it. It would be a no-brainer.
Now, interestingly enough, I looked this today, the larger buildings in that project, which again are 50 feet to the top of the roof,
Yeah.
are closer than, not significantly, but about 50 feet closer to the residents down on the other side
Yeah.
than this building would be to any
Right.
residents.
And
And you don't even notice them.
you don't notice them.
Yeah.
So, right, if this was back there, I think it would have to be a no-brainer, wouldn't have as much concern and maybe my concern's not as founded. So I agree with Mr. Borkowski too. I'd like to see some elevations or some shots, some understanding of what that looks like, because I am less concerned now than I was before. So thank you for your
Okay, thank you.
your input. I think I've kind of cleared it up though too. I think the elevations are mislabeled. If I'm looking here on the drawing that says south elevation, but that's
the east elevation,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
They're architect. They don't know which way north is.
Well, and I was looking at it before and on my tablet, and it wasn't as clear on the tablet. Then when you put that up there, I'm like, well, that's why they put
That's
south.
the north elevation.
Yeah, that's why they put south, because it's on the south.
Yeah,
of that.
sorry, Miss, I'll get that fixed.
That's that's an engineer architect conflict.
Jess, if this whole engineering thing doesn't work out for you, you always got a sales career to fall back.
All right, thank you. You'd be surprised.
All set, Mr. Eckert?
I think I have
Thank you.
addressed my thoughts and concerns. Thank you.
Okay, and in my comments, I'm not averse to this at all. In fact, I liked your explanation. I would like to see that elevation, Mr. Borkowski's suggestion too, just because it would be interesting to see what the view is like from across East Henrietta Road looking there. But the underground parking, again, as Mr. Eckert said, certainly the extra height is a good benefit to having the or I'm sorry, what am I trying to say here? It all makes sense to have the underground parking for the extra height there. So
Just procedurally, if I can interject,
sure.
if I was in your position, I'd be struggling a little bit about what to do next. But if I could at least offer that, so we have our public hearing at the town board next Wednesday. The town board doesn't plan on taking any action, or are they looking to? They're going to need time to review the traffic study and consider other things as well. We could very easily supply this board with a copy of that study as well, of course, and also complete that 3D rendering and elevation and bring it back to the meeting in July. And then this board would then still have the opportunity to make a more formal recommendation one way or another prior to the meeting when the town board would be considering the vote at the end of July. I think that calendar works out.
Yeah, I know the days are close. I'm trying to remember. I think the town board, or planning board is like a day before the town board meeting. In July.
In July?
So a little tight, but again, time wise, if that's okay with you. But I still would think the town board would want some type of preliminary information from the planning board for next week.
Oh, that's fine too. Yeah.
Yep. So it looks like they've got, they want us to vote on this. So. And this is all very tentative, of course. So I guess our recommendation will be for the town board to look at this, obviously, with greater consideration. So, I will, well, we can make a motion to approve as it stands right now, just as a concept type of thing. Mr. Mistrella, do you have any comments?
Just, I take it that since the planning board hasn't been asked to review these issues for an opinion, that this doesn't take the residential out of the component percentage for the corridor and things of that nature.
No, as currently proposed, everything complies with those
And
percentage slots.
you're not over 50% coverage on your parcel and that type of thing.
Yeah, everything is zoning compliant with one weird caveat that the back leg of our building would require rear setback variance because of that property line on the dome. But again, we're looking at all this together and that parking is going to be shared parking. So it's almost a moot point. But other than that, it is code compliant, other than needing the special use permit for the height and the density.
We did ask them to push the building back as far as they could. So that's good. So I think what the town board is looking for is an advisory opinion from this board. I don't know if it's necessarily a vote, but we want the input from the planning board so they can, I'm not gonna say make a decision because they can make a decision next
Right.
Wednesday. Discussion item.
And that opinion could be tied to almost like conditions such as the traffic study, I would think.
Sure.
I think we can certainly vote on how comfortable we might be with the density and with the height, at least at this point. I know there may be a couple. We're waiting to see some other things, but overall comfort level with this as it's proposed right now. We can vote on that. Or I can poll the board.
I have one thing to say.
Yes, Mr.
Before we
Raleigh.
go there, because I really don't want to vote on this because I don't have enough information on it. But the last development that came to the town board when underground parking was what was it? Dunwood?
Yes.
It went underground parking. By the time they got to where they were gonna do it, parking was gone. It was too expensive. Is that gonna happen with this project with you guys? You're saying it's kind of close. You could make it work.
I don't know, again, with Dan, that's what I kind of brought up. I don't want to answer for Jess, but I was wondering if we could make it a condition.
Well, it,
Again, it's concept. We're just advising.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do that now, but right, it is a trade.
I would-
That's what I was communicating, I think.
I would answer Mr. Barley's question that at the project as currently proposed, yes. If, we had to reduce density for some reason, I certainly couldn't make that statement.
and if I can make a suggestion, in your report, assuming that you're gonna overall give a favorable recommendation to the proposed density and the like, put in there with the understanding that there's gonna be underground parking. You can't make it a condition. The town board can in their special use permit. And if they do, then they have to show that when they come in here for site plan per the code. So that's how I would suggest you do it. You're recognizing it's a trade-off and supportive of it with that feature. And if they don't, if the town board says we agree and they decide they're not going to provide that feature, then they need all new approvals.
So I guess my question is, do we have to formally vote on this evening or just give an overall opinion to the board on whether we're overall favorite or overall not in favor of this project at this point?
With a favorable opinion, one way or the other.
Yeah, it's not really a vote,
Yes.
but
Well,
you
it's
can poll people. You can say the board was, percentage wise in
Okay.
favor of this many out of that.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm the most negative on this and I really don't have a problem with it. It's a good plan. So part of that is, as I see it, I am favorable.
Okay.
If pretty much anything changed, but I'm also favorable based on, I would like to see that virtual elevation, so it's a couple contingent things. As far as if you're going to break a couple rules, you guys are doing it very well, I really think you've thought this out and you're giving us apples to apples comparisons. You could really have a heck of a lot more people and keep within the density. So I get that math too. So if you really wanted to put us to the screws, you could with more people.
Yeah, well, let me, I'll poll the board then. And Mr. Borkowski, you just said you're at this point in favor of this. And again, we're going to throw the caveat that we would like to see those renderings at some point. And as it stands with the garage, the underground parking,
Yep.
you're in favor right
Correct.
now. Okay. Mr. Eckert.
I am more in favor than I was prior to the meeting with, so, with what we've learned. So.
Okay, very good.
And I
Mrs.
am again in
Oh,
positive
sorry.
of the, no, I'm sorry, positive to the trade-off. We were gonna, we allow the fourth, the benefit to the underground parking is a good trade-off. I'm
Okay.
in favor of that. And
Thank
I'm in
you.
favor of his density calculations.
Mhm.
Mrs. Brill?
I too am in favor of both. I have notated everything we talked about. And I am excited, not excited, I'm looking forward to seeing the elevation plan from East Henrietta Road. Quite frankly, if it looks like such a lovely building to me, and the opportunity for the landscaping on the front of the parcel, if I lived on the other side of that road,
Yeah,
it looks like it's gonna be something pretty. I mean, it looks like it's gonna be nice. I can't necessarily speak for the opposite, so I immediately looked over to see if there's any apartments facing that way, and there's not. So it's a very clever design.
Yep.
So thank you, Jess. Great job, as always.
and there's an Abbott's right across the street. So
That's right.
So the chair's in favor of this project as it stands right now to relative to density and height. Mr. Barley?
I don't have an opinion. I'm concerned about both. I don't think I have enough information to give you. I don't think I have the authority to really vote on this, but I think what we've talked about should go back to our town board so they can consider what they're going to do, because it's really up to them.
Okay, Mr. List?
Yeah, as it pertains to the discussion item on height and density, I'm in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Reynolds?
I am also in favor as it stands.
Okay,
currently.
so for the record, Mrs. Brill, we have 6 board members in favor of the project as it stands right now relative to density and height. And 1, I'll call it an abstain.
I would say that.
And any further comments, Mr. Mistrella or Mr. Martin? Okay,
None here as well.
very good. Well, I think we're good for now, right? And
Yeah, we are. Thank you very much. Look forward to coming back and showing you some more of the documentation you guys requested. So,
well, thank you for the
Appreciate that,
explanation too. It was very, very
and
well.
thanks again
well done.
for meetings at 6.
I like him too.
Okay. Mr. Martin, any comments about the next meeting at all?
Yes, we had 2 applications that came in. And we try to remember which ones they were now. One was, I don't know why I'm, a subdivision. Yes, all right. So one is a subdivision for Lehigh Station Road, near
Nope.
East River Road. It's a townhome, but they're gonna be as individual lots.
It'll be a public meeting, Heather said too, right?
Yeah, so it's gonna be a public hearing
yeah.
for preliminary. And the other one was for the Smugtown Brewery,
Good.
which is gonna go up near, well, for those of you who are as old as I am, the Star Market Plaza
Yeah,
on the south end there. They're gonna be one of the end caps. So it's community auto.
the old Hollywood video, right?
Hollywood Video,
Yeah,
Yes.
That
okay.
was a Star Market.
It was.
He's old.
Was it the Star
Little
Market?
conveyors that.
Star Market is
Yeah.
in
Chop value
South End,
stamps.
in the corner?
Yellow
I'm gonna see
stamps.
that.
on the
Yeah, I
book.
remember Star Market there.
Mrs. Brill, we had about 4 supermarkets within like a half a mile, right? We had Tops, Wegmans, Star, Augustinelli's. Remember Augustinelli's?
Small deli, yeah.
Yeah.
There's like an Apple's at some point. That was much
Apple
later.
Market, yeah.
Yeah, Star became Apple's and Bell's.
Yeah.
And,
And then it turned into Freddy's.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Borkowski at 7:37. Thank you.
Chairman, I had some stickers for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mechanic.
And then I will end the meeting.